Westworld Season 2, the premiere, has left us with a lot of different mysteries. One of the biggest mysteries, in my opinion, was the fact that not only are Delos secretly collecting hosts' DNA and memory from different guests, like when they have encounters with them, but also somehow Bernard was able to pass DNA scans twice. There's something going on here, and in this video, I'm going to discuss what that is. Real quick, before we get started, I actually reviewed the episode in its entirety, and you can actually click right up here and that link will take you straight to that video. If you have not seen episode 1, go ahead and go watch it, and then watch my breakdown of it, and then come back to this video. Let's begin. Just jumping straight into it here, some of the, main intentions for them collecting DNA is actually in Futureworld, which was the sequel to the original Westworld. They were making clones of people that were in higher positions in power, like senators, presidents, everyone. They were making copies of them, and they planned on sending them out as the real thing. So why would this television version of Delos not be doing the exact same thing? I theorize and predict that they are collecting these DNA and these memories from the host interactions with guests of only certain key players. Now, they're not doing it with every single guest that comes to the park. It wouldn't make sense to just, copy the DNA and have memories and make a clone of someone who's a normal person. These are people in power who they're, collecting this data and this information from. Honestly, it makes sense if you're going to make a convincing clone to have some memories of them as well. And one of the best ways to get to know someone is to watch them in the park. It was drilled into our heads last season that Delos knows its guests. They know everything about you, they know who you are, they know what you like, and they know how to set the game up to make you have the best time ever. So if this is the case, Delos is secretly doing this to the higher end individuals, like people in power, and they plan on replacing them at some point. Now you're probably like, what would be the point of this? Well, power. They want to be able to control not just their corporation and their park, they want to be able to control the world. Now I know this is kind of heavy and I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but it just makes sense. Why else would you need to store DNA from? And, I'm also getting ahead of myself here, but I think the main reason why it was like in a small secluded room that you could obviously tell Charlotte had set up and no one really knew about it, it just makes me think that it's a smaller scale. So they're not doing it to every single host. They're doing it to just ones whose hosts have interactions with guests that have power. So if this is the case, I wouldn't be surprised if Delos eventually plans to replace not only the United States of America, but also just people all across the world in different positions of power. So that way, when they need to, do something like explain and still keep the park open, even after the hosts have destroyed a lot of the guests and just completely killed them, one of the ways that they could still keep the park open is by having these people in higher positions of power to pass certain laws to allow them to still continue to do what they do. I see that eventually, this theory more coming to fruition towards either the end of this year or maybe even, future seasons of the TV show. That's honestly like super in-game for Delos. In the meantime, between time, one of the things they could be doing with the secret DNA collection is making clones to, visit the park. Or, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if I went to Westworld and I loved Westworld a lot, I would probably never want to leave. So one thing that I would, talk to Delos about doing is, since they can make these insanely convincing hosts, maybe you can make one to go into my job for me, so I don't have to go to work, so I can stay here in Westworld. Now, I know that's nowhere near as devious as replacing, world leaders with these clones, but it could be something that maybe started this whole thing. Maybe there were several guests that came that stayed for a long time. They didn't want to leave. They have money, so they convinced the Delos Corporation to clone them and send the clone in their place to go and do their daily tasks, like spend time with their family, go to work, so that they can continue to pay the bills. I personally would have this done if I enjoyed Westworld as much as a lot of these people do, which I would. Now, one thing that kind of popped up in my head when I was crafting this theory, and this is not my theory by any means. This actually, like I said, this is the plot line of the sequel to Westworld, which was Futureworld. It was a movie that came out in 1976, and the plot of that movie was to replace world leaders with these Delos clones. So this is not my theory at all, and a lot of people speculated this as soon as, we were given Westworld as a TV show. So I honestly would not be surprised if this went down, but when theorizing about it, one of the main things that popped into my head is there's no way that you can build a convincing clone just from having their DNA and a few memories of what, happened to them when they interacted with certain hosts in the park. This made me think Disney was a huge inspiration for the actual John Crichton movie, Westworld. He went to, one of those places, I think it was Pirates of the Caribbean, where you ride in on that little boat and you see, these robot pirates everywhere. Well, he got the idea what would happen if those pirates started running amok. This is where Westworld was crafted. Now, Disney is a huge source of inspiration for a lot of different people. What made me think that there's something more going on here is when you go and visit Disney World, you're actually, part of the process to get into the actual park is they take your fingerprint. So why would Delos not, as sort of like a stipulation to get into the park, is taking a small sample of DNA. So they have that DNA, then they also have actual sperm from when you're, having sex with different hosts. So they have a good amount of information for like actually sequencing your body on file just right then and there. Then it's, it dawned upon me that they said they know everything about their guests, and obviously they can watch them in the outside world. They can look at their social media and find almost anything about them, but they're probably recording every single moment of them being in the park. If someone goes to the park enough, you can definitely get an entire, personality test, if you will, about how they act and how they react to certain things in day-to-day situations, because they're spending so much time at the park and they're constantly being watched. You can throw that into an algorithm and have that person, sort of like predict their next move. So I honestly think that Westworld is watching not only when their guests are outside in the outside world, but they're also watching every single moment of them when they're in the park. Another final sort of like nail in the coffin for this theory is the fact that Arnold was able to successfully be cloned by Robert Ford. Robert Ford made Bernard. Bernard convinced everyone and is still currently convincing everyone that he is human. So if it's possible for Bernard to get scanned not only by the secret base that we assume Charlotte made, that no one really else knows about except for maybe the Delos higher ups, like maybe the Man in Black knows about it. If he's able to convince them enough that their scans think Bernard's human, it is 100% possible to clone a senator, a president, a prime minister, anyone, any high up world leader, and replace them with a Delos clone. You're asking what would happen to the original one? Well, when they were in the park, they could have them killed. And these last few things that I want to mention is I wanted to make a theory video on these in and of itself, but we need more information before I could do that. One of the things was we saw Bernard wake up on the beach with the wine glass next to him, which didn't make sense because the party had happened, at this point in time, 2 weeks prior. So that's one thing that I want to touch on, but also the fact that the massive body of water is there. Now, I predicted in my breakdown video that this was Arnold and it's sort of like in a flashback almost, but basically Robert Ford used the giant terraforming machine to make a giant canal that sort of like took the water from the sea and put it in this place, this giant canyon, and filled it up. Well, what it seems to be, and what a lot of people are theorizing in the comment section, is that this was some massive flood. So if this was a flood, what happened, and why did this situation occur? I don't really know. Like I said, I want to make a theory video on it, but until then, we need more information. I plan on breaking down the promo for episode 2 coming up in the next day or so. Let me know down below if there's something else that you want me to touch on. I know a lot of people are saying that they think that the park is a giant island or a giant peninsula somewhere in close to China, because there was this scene where they first arrived on the beach and they were actually arguing with Chinese guards. I do not speak Mandarin or Cantonese, so I was not able to translate this, but once it is translated, I will either announce it in a video or retweet it on Twitter. So make sure you go hop on Twitter and follow me. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 422. Also, if you want to stay notified on everything Westworld, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I will be uploading at least 4 videos per episode of Westworld. I want to thank you all so much for watching. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunt's Reviews. Real quick, and then I'm out of here. One of the things that I noticed was I had confirmed that that was in fact Robert Ford, the human that was shot in the head by Delos last season, because there were actually maggots crawling on his eye sockets. Well, I went back and rewatched, and there are actually maggots on the tiger that's laying on the beach. Right when Bernard is having that conversation, he ends up looking down and they see, like, what is this tiger doing over here? This does not belong in Westworld. It's most likely from Shogun World. Well, I honestly think that what's happening here is that it's still a human body that Robert Ford had killed. It's just the tiger could have been there, sitting there a lot longer. And not to mention there's water around, so you have water decaying this flesh a little bit faster. So maybe eventually the hosts begin to decay, but humans decay a lot faster. If you remember, there was like hundreds of hosts that had gone temporarily insane kept in that storage downstairs. And it was a cold storage, but it's almost like, you know, even if you just put a human body in I don't know how I know this information, but I feel like the human would still rot. The robots, not so much. They decay at a lot slower of a rate. So this doesn't switch around and make you still think that that could be a host that was shot by Dolores, and Robert Ford may still be alive. But it was the fact that Robert Ford had been laying there for 11 days and they ended up finding him. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think about the maggots and hosts conspiracy down below in the comment section.